In this video, it's another exciting bus day here at Hutton Park Hangars in Cheshire, and I'm especially excited because effectively what we've got here is the earliest Leyland Atlantean, the rear-engined revolution amongst double-decker buses, and one of the last as well. So we've got 1958 and 1984 represented, so I'm really looking forward to seeing what the differences are between the two buses and what they're like to drive. But we've got a Leyland PD2 here as well, because obviously these rear-engine buses were all new technology in 1958, and for a while companies kind of stuck with rear engine. So this will show us the advantage of the rear engine bus and also show us the key differences. So this bus, FHF 451, is the start of that rear-engined revolution. Weirdly, Leyland didn't build any pre-production prototypes. There were a couple of prototype rear-engine things that had the engine at the back, but also rear entrance. Very, very strange setup, and still had wasted space on this corner. Whereas the Atlantean that actually reached production in 1958 ended up being much simplified. Now, what I hadn't realised when I started filming the Atlanteans this morning is that this is here. This is not an Atlantean. This is a rare, unique, surviving rear-engined Leyland prototype from the sort of early to mid-50s, while they were kind of developing the theme of the rear-engine bus. There were two prototypes built. First one sadly scrapped in the 60s, but this second one has survived. But there are many unanswered questions, like why is it still a half cab when the engine's at the back? There's nothing in there but batteries. So you got all this wasted space that doesn't really make sense. But I'll take you around the back, because that's where things get really clever. It is being restored, it is part way through the restoration, but the engine is here. And the big problem with having your rear-engined bus with a rear entrance is that obviously the engine gets a bit in the way, but to their credit, look how slim that is. The intrusion is actually quite minimal. So that's quite impressive. Note this, by the way, this little extra door here is because if the bus was to roll over onto its left-hand side, you wouldn't be able to get out the door. So there's an extra door just in case. I love that. But yeah, XTC 684 is the sole surviving Lowloader prototype. So this is the final drive. You're coming out the back of the gearbox and you're going at an angle that takes it to the rear axle. And these actually had a drop center rear axle, which helped the floor be incredibly low. So you got two full height decks, but actually in quite a low vehicle. And this will have the double wishbone front suspension that wasn't used on the Atlantean. Incredible survivor. The key thing is this area right here on the corner, where now we've got the entrance. You can have single man operation because the driver can also take money, whereas on the older half cab designs, you've just kind of got this wasted area. Some of them did have a flush front, so perhaps some storage space above the engine, but really you couldn't add extra passenger carrying capacity because it was just dead space. It's mostly engine. So by moving the driveline to the rear and having it mounted transversely across the chassis, you're leaving so much more space for passenger carrying. You can even have passengers sitting above the engine effectively on the top deck. But the Atlantean always had this sort of bustle back design, so that the entire mechanical package is contained within here, with drive going forward to the rear axle. And it's just so much more efficient. But it needed a change in regulations. Buses were allowed to be longer, 30-foot extra length. It meant they could have that extra overhang at the front. And with that extra overhang, you could then fit an entrance. So you're reducing running costs by only needing a driver who also acts as conductor. So it would almost feel wrong at this point to do a bus video without my friend David here, who has several buses, the Daimler I drove and the Bristol RE that I drove in a couple of years ago and last year, but you've also arranged this today, so huge thanks. And I want to give a quick shout out to where we are at Hutton Park Hangars. You have open days here and a running day later in the year?
Yeah, second Sunday in August is the running day when you can come along and ride for nothing.
Ride buses like this,
on all these vehicles. Yes.
Excellent. But yeah, I wanted to get your input in this one, because obviously you were around for the conversion from the half cab buses.
Oh yes, not in a professional sense.
Not in a professional sense, but you would have been a boy back then?
Yeah, yes.
But I mean, it must have seemed very, very strange.
Very much so, yes. I mean, obviously, 1958, when this was introduced, I was 4 years old at the time.
Yeah.
And it was revolutionary. The first rear-engine double-decker on sale in Britain. The Americans had beaten us by 20 years. The Fifth Avenue Coach Company
for a while.
had been there, but we don't like to rush our fences in Britain.
Yeah, take our time.
And the Atlantean really was an enormous step away from what had gone before.
Yeah.
Particularly in this case with Wallasey Corporation.
Yeah,
because I mean, if you look at just at the fleet name, Wallasey Corporation Motors, it's like something out of the 1920s.
Yeah, yeah.
And if you look at the type of buses that Wallasey were buying in the 40s and 50s, they were Leyland PDs,
like this one,
but with Wayman bodies that looked as though they'd been styled in the 30s.
Blimey.
So they were a very conservative, rather old-fashioned operator.
How strange.
And suddenly, in 1958, when other operators were thinking, shall we buy one or two Atlanteans and try them out? Are they going to be a good idea? Are they going to be a lemon? Wallasey rushed out and ordered 15 straight off the bat.
Blimey.
And then 10 the next year.
Yeah.
So they'd committed themselves completely to this new concept.
Yeah, and that was not a universal thing at the time. There was still a lot of companies who were like, no, we like the half cabs.
The half
we
cabs,
know how we can maintain them.
Yeah, they only finally disappeared about 1968, 69.
Yeah. And even then, London carried on with the route masters for a while.
Oh yeah, but they stopped deliveries in about 68 into 69 because at that point Barbara Castle had introduced the new bus grant because they'd realised the bus industry was starting to get into financial problems and that the way forward was going to be one-man operation.
Yeah.
And so initially it was a 25% grant where the government paid towards a new bus on condition that it was suitable for one-man operation. And then shortly afterwards they bumped it up to a 50% grant. And of course that killed all these half-cab buses overnight because they couldn't be one-manned. When the Atlantean was originally introduced, of course, it was still one-man operation of double-deckers wouldn't be legal for another 10 years.
No, so you would still have had a conductor.
Yeah, so there were lots of other reasons for having the rear engine. I mean, the obvious one was that by getting the engine out of the way, by placing the driver right opposite the entrance, it improved safety.
Yeah.
You could.
Well, you think how far the driver is away from the rear platform.
You're not relying on the conductor giving you bell signals all the time. And it reduced step accidents. The other thing is you can actually have a single step entrance because there's no mechanical gubbins underneath the front of that
very
vehicle.
True.
So that makes it easier for anybody who's got mobility problems. And another big factor, of course, is it vastly improves the driver's working environment because it's now quieter, it's cleaner.
You're not right next to the engine.
And it improves communication with the conductor. It's not that he's not reliant on just a bell constantly going in
actually talk to each other.
And
normally you're completely screened off.
And there was another issue as well at the time. From the mid-50s, it became legal to have 30-foot double-deckers. Prior to that, you were limited to 27 feet unless they were on 3 axles. Once you could have 30-foot buses, that meant you had the possibility of having 70, 72 passengers. At which point the trade unions started to say, well, hang on a minute, these conductors are having to do more and more work, getting more and more fares, and of course they get disciplined if they miss collecting fares. And it's all just getting too much and lads aren't going to have it. And
that didn't work too well in the long term, did it?
Well,
we'll get rid of the conductors.
Well, yeah, but what tended to happen was a lot of operators, like the big ones like Birmingham Corporation, Manchester, Liverpool as well, I think, they never moved from 27-foot double-deckers because the union pressure was there to say, no, 62, 64 passengers really is the maximum a conductor can cope with.
Blimey.
But of course, Once you've got the driver looking after the passengers boarding and alighting, you can then go back and say, well, come on, chaps, we've taken a big chunk of your job away, especially the safety critical part of it. So now you can get on with collecting the fares.
Yeah, yeah.
So that was, you know, a big benefit as well at the time.
Interesting. Yeah. Right, we should probably have a look at the mechanical package, because obviously that is one of the key differences with these buses.
Yes.
So here we are at the business end, and as you can see, transverse engine layout. It's just like a Mini, basically. Yeah. But yeah, it must have been very strange as a driver going from having the engine right next to you to right at the other end of the vehicle.
Yes. Yeah. Well, in the original version of the Atlantean, the standard engine was the Leyland 600. After the war, for some reason, British diesel engine manufacturers decided that they would express the displacement in cubic inches.
Okay, just like America.
Yeah, whether this was to impress the Americans, I don't know.
Yeah,
but it's basically 9.8 litres, the Leyland 600. The 680 was an option, but very few people actually went for that. One of the exceptions being Wirral, who had a fleet of these which they used to operate motorway services from Lancashire to London. Yes, they operated.
That's a long way on a double decker.
Yeah, they operated at under the title of the Gay Hostesses, which is a name which I don't think you would use these days.
Wouldn't quite work so well. But, yeah.
But generally the 600. Later on, the 680 became the standard engine. That's 11.1 litres.
Okay.
Basically the same engine that was available in the PDs, in the half cabs.
Yeah.
But of course, a lot more complicated in terms of transmission.
Yeah, so we've got a semi-automatic pneumocyclic.
Yeah, that's right. And of course, you've got the issue that you've got to turn the drive from going that way to going that way to a back axle. It gets quite complicated, and the angle drive, you know, these were always a weak spot on these sort of vehicles.
Yeah. And of course, one reason why the transmission's a bit noisier, because it's just all the angles everywhere.
Yeah, and of course, there's never a free lunch, is there? Because although the driver physically has an easier job because he's using a remote control rather than physically changing gears, he can't really hear what's going on at the back of the engine.
No.
So timing the gear changes tends to be a bit trickier, and if anything goes wrong, if things start to overheat or, you know...
Yeah, you got no clues up the front.
You know, you're reliant on a warning light if it works.
Yeah.
Inherently worse position to mount an engine.
Yeah, because you've got no airflow. So we've got the radiator.
No, you have to have
sitting in here.
The radiator in there.
Side mounted like a Mini.
A long propeller shaft that comes off the engine to drive this fan here.
Oh my gosh. Oh yeah, right at the back. It's like a prop shaft.
So there's obviously mechanical losses there, and also you get this vacuum effect when the bus is moving forward, that it tends to pull road dirt up into the engine compartment, and that combined with the inevitable oil leaks and electrical short circuits and things, and engine fires tended to become an increasing problem when these vehicles were in service. So the industry had to learn that one thing you needed to do on a very regular basis was to steam clean the back ends of them if you were going to avoid having any problems.
Wow.
But the engine itself is intrinsically a very reliable engine. And in fact, that bus has now been refitted with a 680.
Oh, okay.
Because as has the Leyland PD, because 600 engines are not easy to find now.
No. And we're also displaying another key difference you'll notice between the two buses, which is engine access. Oh, we're struggling to even get the cover up on this. It's the entire back end of the bus. It's really heavy and it latches in weird ways. This is a bit easier.
And you can, if you pull the knob there, and I pull this one.
Oh, you can pull the
You can
whole
swing the whole thing out. What happened with those, of course, they were a great big heavy thing. They were inclined to land on the heads of unwary fitters. And a lot of the earlier vehicles were actually refitted with a setup like this. Just to make them more practical, because most of the time you don't really need to get at this end of the engine, the radiator. You don't really need to get at the other end unless you're changing a compressor belt. So for most access, just this central panel is adequate.
Plus having this swing out is absolutely perfect.
Yes.
Much better. Just while we're here at the back end, you'll note the rear lights are not original. They would have been upgraded in service, as indeed they have been on the earlier one as well. So it wouldn't have had combined lamp units like these, sort of fitted slightly over this bumper trim down the bottom. So that is a later addition. And the difficulty with preservation is how far do you go, and at what stage in the bus's life do you try and recreate how it was? Because, I mean, this bus was blue at one point and is now yellow, so always a difficulty. So is this the colour it would have been when new?
This is the colour it would have been when new.
Yeah.
When it was absorbed by the Merseyside Passenger Transport Executive, they initially had two different liveries. The buses in the Liverpool stayed green.
Okay.
The buses on the Wirral, because they had blue Birkenhead buses and they had cream Wallasey buses, they compromised with a blue and cream livery.
Aha.
So nobody had really won, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, in its later life, the bus would have ended up, I think, in the Verona green, which the PTE adopted. And this actually, it lasted until 1977, which was a phenomenally long time for a PTE bus. Most PTEs tended to get rid of buses at 13 years.
But it's also impressive because obviously this was a brand new concept. Effectively, the prototyping was done with the customers. So
Yes.
there must have been a few niggles to iron out.
Oh,
back
yeah,
in the
yeah.
day.
And as the years went on, the PDR Atlanteans developed largely through customer feedback.
Yeah.
There were lots of modifications, and they started to offer other features like power steering and automatic chassis lubrication and so on. When they got to 1972, at that point they realised this thing had its day, really. They'd been losing ground steadily from the early 1960s to the Daimler Fleet Line.
Yeah, I must admit, as a Birmingham boy, I am a Fleet Line fan.
The Fleet Line was actually a better engineered bus, and of course it had the benefit of a Gardner engine, so it was always going to be more fuel efficient.
And there was another key difference with the Fleet Lines. They had the drop centre rear axle.
Yes,
as well.
What Leyland did eventually, they put some pressure on Daimler, and Daimler allowed them to use the Daimler concentric drive gearbox.
Oh, how very kind.
Yes, because on the Daimler, the drive went through the gearbox and then back again. So you were actually driving forward to the back axle, close to the centre line of the bus. So it did away with the complicated angle drive that the Atlantean had originally had. By the sort of early 70s, Leyland had taken over Daimler.
Indeed.
And
Bristol.
And they ceased to develop the Fleet Line from that point on. But what they did do, they realised they needed to get their act together, and so they introduced a new version of the Atlantean, the AN68, which, as this is,
one of these.
And the AN68 then continued to 1984 when they finally stopped supplying them to the domestic market. The AN68 had a lot of improvements. I mean, there were hundreds of improvements. They put stainless steel brake pipe, air piping into it. They offered a fully automatic gearbox. The 680 engine became standard. They increased the front overhang. So that meant, because now we're on one-man operation, of course.
Indeed.
And in those days, to try and speed up one-man operation, there was a lot of emphasis on self-service. So passengers could bypass the driver and use some sort of a self-service machine. So a lot of operators...
I thought that was a new thing. No, apparently not. I grew up in Birmingham, where it's still as backwards as it was in the 80s. Exact fare only, and that is kind of it.
Yeah, a lot of operators were looking for that facility, so they wanted a wider entrance. And that also, by having a bit more of the bus structure forward of the front axle, it meant you could improve the crash resistance, because on these early PDRs, the driver was sat very near the accident. So the AN68, it's got a bit more structure in the front end.
Excellent.
And yes, there were a whole host of, things became standard, automatic chassis lubrication, and they did a lot of the sort of plumbing, the wiring, to make modifications and make replacements and servicing much more simple than it had been.
Excellent. Right. Well, let's head aboard and we can see some of the key differences. We will start with Atlantean number 1 here. Right. So here we are sitting in the original Atlantean. I see what you mean. I mean, the front of the bus is there.
You're
It's
quite
close to
vulnerable.
my knees.
Yes, and also, of course, you sat much lower down than you would have been in a half cab.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Never
you know,
change.
if you ran into something with a half cab, the engine tended to take the impact.
Yeah,
but in one of these,
But
it's
plus you got the wheel and everything.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
there is a lot in front of
you
in
are
front
the
of
crumple zone in this.
Yeah. But I actually feel quite vulnerable. Nice though. We've got a nice moquette seat. I don't know if it would have had that originally.
No, well, possibly so. You've even got armrests as
Oh
well, which is a
my
very
days.
unusual feature on a
Wow.
a bus.
Yeah, I think we will see the later Atlantean rather different. But of course,
Yes.
they were also built to different specifications
Yes.
depending on the customer as well.
Yeah, but they are pretty Spartan, these early Atlanteans.
Yeah, we
because
got a speedometer.
that's it.
and that's it.
You've no air gauge.
No.
All you've got is a warning light and in this case a buzzer.
Mm-hmm.
That's your lot basically. And this panel, which was a fairly standard Leyland feature on lots of vehicles,
Yeah. Beautiful.
you've got really not a lot going on. You do have the luxury of a cab heater on this one.
Oh wow, luxury. Oh yeah,
I'm
there we
not
go.
sure how effective that would actually be because you're pumping
Yeah,
the water
coolant's a long
30
railway.
feet,
Yeah.
the length of the bus.
Yeah, as double deckers evolved, I think they moved the radiators to the front of the
Well,
bus.
some had the VRs, and later on, things like the Dennis had the radiator at the front. But the Fleet line was worse actually because that had a Gardner engine, and the Gardner's so efficient it never gets hot.
It never gets hot.
So yes, the demisting was always an issue with some of these
Yeah.
earlier vehicles. And of course, now that the driver is sharing the space with the passengers who are all piling on in their wet raincoats in winter, demisting the near side windscreen tends to be an issue.
Yeah.
You know, usually you'd give your conductor a leather and get him to give it a
Yeah,
wipe.
before all your conductors
Yes.
vanished as well. Marvellous. Right, we should probably get the cameras mounted and go for a drive then.
Right.
Right then, here we go. We're going to try and fire up the beast. So handbrake is set. Do we need start there?
It is out, I think. It's You
Oh,
just,
that's
if it's
out.
pulled out. You just
And
need
just
to
press the
start the switch,
starter. And there we are. The engine fires up miles away. And that was kind of another issue when these rear engine buses first came out. Some people were concerned that they could sneak up on people because out the front, very, very quiet, and all the noise is at the back. Oh yeah, a bit of lag on them. Lovely. Now we would like to conduct the important business of the wiper test, but we haven't found anything that works yet. We have a horrible feeling the wiper may not be functioning currently, which makes me very sad, but there is a video on YouTube where you can watch this very bus in action, and it was a rainy day. So straight into second. There's the drive. Check we're clear. Sound the horn. Mostly just because I wanted to. And we're away. Unassisted steering, so many turns. The mirrors aren't bad. This one's nice and low actually on my side here. There's no one coming through. Oh, we've not come this way before. I'm just making sure we're not clobbering any of these lovely white curbs. But yeah, these buildings at Hutton Park Hangars are amazing. And this one contains a little air museum, so if you can get to one of the open days, definitely do. We must wait for the gates to let us out. Oh wow, those brakes are quite strong. I think I need to be further forward.
Yeah, you can get a bit closer.
So this is a major advantage in this bus compared to other double deckers I've driven. I have to remember where the front wheels are, of course, they're quite a long way behind me.
Yes.
Is that David's just here, so whereas in the half cabs you're very much on your own. Yeah, feeling the pressure with this one. This is a lovely, lovely bus. Reach down to the indicator. I can see the flashing indicator in the mirror, so I know that's working. check we're clear. Always take your time on the gear changes. It lets the first gear disconnect before you engage the next. Nervously eyeing up the branches. And we're going to have a slight change of route to our usual. We're going to go right here instead. Oh gosh. It's not very heavy, but it does need a lot of turning. But yes, what a transformation from the earlier buses that would have either a pre-selector gearbox or a full manual gearbox. This is really quite a lot easier to drive. But you know, those annoying passengers are just there now, so the drivers cannot all have been particularly keen on the change. Up to the dizzy heights of 30 miles an hour. So the overall height of this vehicle is 14 feet and 3 inches. They did do, oh gosh, those brakes are powerful. They did do a low bridge version, but it had a sunken walkway on the top of it effectively, which robbed even more height from down below. So the extended lever means you can easily reach it without having to take your hand off the wheel. But originally the Leyland 600 engine was 120 brake horsepower, all of 1800 RPM. So this re-engined one, now with a 680, has a little more, but progress is still somewhat steady. Definitely more suited to towns than rural service. That's foot right to the floor. So yeah, very, very different driving experience to the half caps. You certainly don't have to work very hard on this. Few clanks and rattles though. This road perhaps not the best. Oh gosh. Actually, I can hear the engine a bit more than perhaps I anticipated, so that's a good thing. A bit wide, we've got some big Leylandii there. Left again?
Left again.
Oh, this is a very interesting little spot. Wow. Very pretty churchyard. So while there's a bus running day in August, there's also, there tend to be bus shuttles when they have the open days at Houghton Park Hangars. Keep an eye on the branches a bit coming through here. There is a bus stop though, so they must have a bus service through. Oh gosh, yeah, we are hitting them a bit.
Yeah.
Take this one slowly because that's hanging very low.
Yeah, the wet weather doesn't help at all.
No, it weighs the branches down.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's going across the roof, I think. Got a bit slow for third. Lovely old bus noises as well, but yeah, certainly a lot quieter with the engine that far away from you. Going back to the A41, so left signal on. I don't need a dash repeater because I can see the left hand indicator quite clearly as well. No, it's starting to rain and I haven't got my wipers. It's certainly an easy bus to drive in traffic because there is no clutch pedal, no gear change pedal. It's a centrifugal clutch, I believe, and yeah, semi-automatic. So it does a lot of the work for you, and some of the later ones even did all the work for you. But it's going to be very, very interesting to see how the more modern Atlantean compares. Gone for first, full acceleration gear. Here we go, taking a bus on the motorway. Up the hill of the slip road. There we are, 40 miles an hour. Set it on the side of the bus and she is doing it. That is a really, really nice driving experience. Well, there we go. That was the lovely Atlantean #1, which incidentally has Metro Camel Works body, MCW, based in the Midlands, very close to where I did my work experience at the LDV factory, Washwood Heath, I think. And now we're going to go on to the 1984 Atlantean, which has bodywork by Alexander up in Scotland. Very distinctive with the peaked section at the top of the roof. That was definitely one of their trademarks, but I think this is going to be very different in more ways than one. There you can see that prop shaft that drives the van. There's your pneumatic driven. You've got to build the revs up to get the air pressure up so we can go for a drive. So notably more austere in this one. We're back on the vinyl seats, so perhaps not so much fun on a hot day, but we have got an air handbrake. That's an advantage. And the gear controllers moved to the right hand side, so similar to the Leyland National, although some Nationals were retrofitted left, as it happens. Nice big indicator stalk, so I can reach that nicely from this enormous steering wheel. But we have got power steering now, and I'm very pleased to say we also have, hopefully, working windscreen wipers. Is there a wash? Let's see. We got hazards, reverse horn, fog, headlights, side and tails, demister, all the various lighting. Oh, it's only got wipers. There we go. Oh, and I've managed to park them in the wrong place. Yay! There we go. So at least we've got working wipers just in case it rains today. The throttle is in a much nicer place. There's much more space here than the earlier Atlantean. I found the pedal was so far back on that early one. And got a nice footrest there as well. Air brakes, as usual. And then we've got the air throttle. So second all right for pottering around, do you think? Or should I go first?
Yeah, you should. Well, you should be all right. But,
okay, into second we go then. So lift up detent to stop you accidentally selecting reverse. Oh wow, yes, that steering is much lighter. And so the gearing is so different as well, so turning the wheel actually does stuff. Throttle a bit more responsive, I would say. And the engine actually sounds a bit smoother, I think, even though it's the same engine. Let's find the sweet spot that opens the gates magically. There we go. So yeah, by the time this Atlantean was built, Leyland had acquired all of its rivals, like Daimler and Bristol. And they tried launching the very technologically advanced Titan, which was not successful. So they also came up with the Olympian, which also had a very long service life. Check we're all clear. We're not. Bit of a delay where you go stop and then you stop. Similar bit of clag out the back. It feels a little more eager than the older bus. I wonder if the governor's opened up a little more on this one. Or maybe it's all in my head. No, it definitely feels a bit perkier. We're doing it around 40 miles an hour. I think the ride feels a bit smoother as well, so they definitely made some improvements. The original Lowloader prototypes had double wishbone front suspension, but for the production Atlantean they reverted back to good old leaf springs. Slightly alarming sound of a go-kart track right next to us. Not something wrong with the bus, thankfully. Not quite timing my rev blips right. Let's see how the suspension is along this private road, which is definitely on the bumpy side. Yeah, there's plenty of fixtures and fittings to rattle around in a bus. And this is without having a door full of change. Imagine that racket. Oh, we caught the red light. I'll admit it, the little gear lever is one reason I've always wanted to drive a classic bus. The Daimler fleet lines in Birmingham when I grew up were so equipped. I'm always fascinated how this massive bus had such a... this bit of road really isn't very good. Such a tiny gear lever. Ah, there we go, back on the smooth tarmac. But of course this was still something the drivers had to think about, which gear is appropriate, which one to be in. And trying to twirl the wheel, get around tight urban environments while messing with gears. So the move to fully automatic was a big boon. I think Tyne and Weir had the fully automatic option. So we're going right here?
No, go left.
Yeah.
And then at the next junction, go right.
Okay. Oh yes, so much difference having the power steering. You have to forget there are no wheels on the corners, so you think you're going to go up the curb, but you don't because the platform's swinging over the curb. One key change with the gear change is the gear change on the earlier Atlantean sits in the gate 3 and 4, but this one just goes wherever you leave it. I'll now go left.
Yeah.
Still second, or do you think first?
Probably first to get out of here.
There's definitely a knack to the timing of the gear changes, trying to get on the throttle just as it's getting the gear, so smooth it out is quite the challenge, and then trying to do a rev blip on the downshift. Oh, perfect, lovely when you get it right. Sorry, not saying much, concentrating. Lots going on. But yes, is it moving the game on a lot since 1958? Perhaps not, but it is definitely easier to drive. I'm not sure it's more comfortable. I think the seat is quite a bit harder, and I wouldn't fancy it in the summer. Hot, sweaty days on a vinyl seat. Oh, thanks, mate. Let's just carve up the bus with old brakes, that's fine. We got metal bars, that's what's cracking. View from the top. Well, there we go, a fascinating comparison between two very different Leyland Atlanteans. You can definitely feel the progress. This one much easier to drive, but oh my gosh, this one is so charming. I just think it is absolutely beautiful bus, and still not exactly difficult to drive either, but power steering does make its difference. So huge thanks to Hutton Park Hangars, where you can see these buses on their open days, and especially on the running day in August. And huge thanks to David for arranging this and being our font of all knowledge on buses. And we look forward to seeing you in a future video. Farewell.